What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV. Happy Monday. Welcome back. And make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're new or the notification bell if you're returning. Let's get this week rocking and rolling. Hope you had a great weekend. Today we're talking about a bit about current state of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Seems to be some interesting things happening with both of these. Talking about altcoins. And then I want to talk specifically about timing and strategy. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I think this is something that can help a lot of people. I know it's something that I've been trying to adopt, and we'll talk about that. Talk about what's going on with Gemini and OTC trading, and a few pieces that I thought were interesting. A great article that I would encourage everyone to read. So let's just dive into it and rock this out. So if you guys were watching the price over the weekend, basically at the end of, I believe it was end of Friday, the price of Bitcoin was, I mean, this thing was just like hovering around. It was just getting bounced around by all these bots, algorithms, and it was just incredible consolidation of price. Typically, when it tightens up like that, it means that there's going to be a big price movement, either up or down, right? That's like what Bollinger Bands are all about, if you want to go look that up. But you could see that tightening up really, really big at the end of the week. And then, as we saw, it exploded twice, really. And then it kind of had these consolidation, these kind of chair patterns, which we see really on all time frames. And then early this morning, we got our friendly dump, which is always, you just can't get away from it for some reason. And there's not really any, there was no impetus for this. There was no necessarily any news article that came out that drove this. All I can say is that if you were watching the books this weekend at all, there was some crazy, I would maybe call it spoofing, just a lot of buy walls and sell walls being thrown up, especially on Bitfinex, on Bitcoin. $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 Bitcoin just going back and forth. So it seems to me that the price increase, I don't know. It's just the more I'm looking at these books and the more I'm just seeing it kind of have these jumpy prices and these big dumps, it really looks like there's something going on here, some sort of manipulation, or at the very least, it's just the byproduct of there being a very low supply remaining. So it could end up being a good thing, is that it's the same stuff that's been going on, but because there's just not as much Bitcoin to buy and sell because everyone, like, it's exhausted the overall supply, that you're just seeing these extreme moves more than you ever would. So keeping an eye on that. But we'll talk about kind of what the strategy can be for these situations in a minute here. But overall, I think that we're still kind of waiting in a wait and hold pattern. You can see this longer term trend line. This is with the log scale on. And if you take it off, it's actually, we breach through it on certain trend lines, especially starting in early March. If you drew a line down there, we would be breaching through it on the non-log line. But for now, we're still trying to break out of this, make a little progress, take 2 steps back, make a little progress, take 2 steps back, and continue forward as we do. Now, what's interesting is you flip on the volume on both Ethereum and on Bitcoin. And when you zoom out, we're looking at the 4-hour here. Obviously, you see some dumps in price starting on the 18th of March, give or take. But you're also starting to see some of these really major volume areas. And typically, when you see these kind of at the slope getting less steep, traditionally you would look at that, and that would be the beginnings of a potential accumulation pattern on a large scale accumulation, because there's a huge spike in volume, but not a huge decrease in price. All it did was kind of slow down the downward momentum. So we're seeing that big time on Ethereum. We're seeing it a little bit on Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's a bit of a different beast based on the size, based on the price, and based on the amount of players involved. But with Ethereum, there's something going on here from a support standpoint. I mean, you can see that the price is obviously matches up very nicely to last September's big resistance level. So we're seeing something. By no means are we out of the woods, but technically speaking, if you knew nothing about the fundamentals of Ethereum and like how it impacts ICOs, it's showing some signs of holding on, right? And what specifically, if you pull up this, I think that this is a really good indicator. There's an article this morning, last night, where it's just like a regular technical analysis article of Ethereum, and it says the relief rally ahead, oversold Ether eyes gains against Bitcoin. If you don't know what that means, oversold on this chart down here, this purple line is called the RSI. When it goes below this dotted line, that's kind of the de facto oversold indicator, which means that it's below what the normal price should be, loosely speaking, right there. And this is actually a situation where I would go back to my more of a fundamental macro perspective as opposed to technicals. Because if you look at the technicals on any of these charts, especially Ethereum right now, I mean, there's a very, very, very compelling case for this to turn around and to start going back up. I mean, I think that for a variety of reasons. From a fundamental and macro standpoint, I think that it's a gamble still, in my opinion, because right, there's so many unknowns with ICOs, with securities, with how ICOs are going to liquidate their Ethereum, whether or not Ethereum can continue to fund ICOs. Who knows what's going to happen with that? And so to me, this chart actually has two viewpoints, right? You got the technical one, which may actually be a little bit more hopeful, and then you get the fundamental and macro one, which is when you look at the bigger picture of with the ecosystem, how much is that price of $395 as of right now, US dollars, how accurate is that to the necessity for Ethereum in the ecosystem and for the future ecosystem? And that's less of a hard science than technical analysis. But I think that's a really important caveat, not for Ethereum, but because every day you and I and everyone else logs into Twitter, maybe you go to CoinDesk, whatever, and you are going to see articles that talk about particular coins in a bullish or bearish light, but you rarely see them talking about the one that people don't want to hear, right? So right now, it's going to probably get a lot more shares and a lot more Monday morning. People are going to be much more excited to see a bullish sentiment on Ethereum than they would be like, here's all the reasons why Ethereum might go down. And taking opinions out of this and what anyone believes is going to happen, I think that's super critical to make sure that you're constantly just bucketing your information into the proper silos, so that when you do make a decision, you're making it with the best possible ammo you have. Let's look at overall market cap. I want to talk quickly about altcoins, and then I want to talk really about this a piece of a book that I think is going to be very helpful. And as always, none of this is professional advice at all. All entertainment value, and I hope you get entertainment value out of it. So when we look at the coinmarketcap.com, we're seeing a bit of a bounce. There's nothing new here. I think NEO is really the only story. I couldn't find anything about what's driving this, other than I believe that there's a Chinese holiday ending today, or last night, I should say. But I couldn't find any particular thing that drove this. So I'm sure there is, but for this video, I do not have it. So you're seeing this kind of across the board. When things start to look a little bit good, altcoins get it. I mean, there's nothing new here. What's really important, beyond market cap, beyond dominance, beyond price, is something that I read a long time ago, and I got to reread this book, and I'll put this in I think it's in the Coin Mastery store, the bookstore I have. Reminiscence of a Stock Reminiscences of a Stock Operator. It's a great book written in the early 20s and talks a lot about what it's like to be in the stock business back then. Obviously the red tape, and I won't bore you with the details. It's a terrific book. I would highly recommend you reading it. But one thing that he talks about, it's not even a big part of the book. And I've mentioned this before. In any major rally or in any trend set, whether that be bullish or bearish. So let's look at, Bitcoin as an example. Anytime you see a clear trend being set, you can break it into, let's call it 8 parts. I believe that's how many he breaks it into in the book. And what he talks about is how a vast majority of people, both professionals and amateur investors, traders, whatever you want to call it, try to nail the first and the 8th parts of that trend. For example, right now, let's say the trend, the bear trend, let's say that started for Bitcoin in the middle of December, and it's continuing now. So, and if you imagine slicing this 4-month, it's a 3-month trend, 3.5-month trend into 8 pieces, you could easily see the rectangles. Now, what happens is that as we are getting closer, hopefully, to some sort of reversal, people are trying to time the bottom, right? And you're seeing this a lot with altcoins. You're going on Twitter, you're seeing people being like, oh, I'm accumulating this, I'm buying this, like the price looks great, everything, whatever. And they're trying to get the absolute bottom instead of waiting for the market to truly confirm that it's okay. We're out of a bear cycle. We are back into a bull cycle, or at least we are, in an accumulation cycle or whatever. There's confirmation of it. And then you've got 4, 5, 6 of those rectangles to enjoy the trend, right? It's hopefully going to be a bull cycle. So you're going to miss the first block, but you're going to get the other, hopefully 6, because you want to sell before the end of it anyway. And that is such a critical piece. And this is something that I see. I'm seeing a lot of this on Twitter. I'm seeing a lot of it just in general. So many people are just, I don't know if they're terrified of missing the bottom, or if it's like a dopamine thing, or if it's a pride thing. I don't know. But I don't know why people are so concerned about getting the absolute bottom, right? Why not just wait until the bottom is figured out, and then all the technicals and all the fundamentals, everyone's like, okay, now we're actually back in a bull run. And maybe you miss out on 20 or 30% gains, but your risk is so much lower because you're in a trend. And that is something that I think that everybody, I know for myself, I've definitely done that many times, tried to pick the bottom, and it's worked a few times and it hasn't worked a few times. And it's just not a long-term strategy. And so if you are doing that, especially with your altcoins, why not just wait until we know we're in a bull trend? Wait for the 15, 20, 30% to happen, confirm over a long enough time frame, call it a week, and then you can start to buy in because you're in a bull run. Something to think about, but I think that is that's how you don't lose money, remember? And that's I think we can all agree that not losing money is a very, very important skill to have in anything related to finance, crypto, whatever you want to call it. So you should check this book out. If you don't, go to coinmaster.com/store if you ever want to read the books. I believe it's in there. If it's not, I'll definitely add it. It's a good book, though. Now, going along the Bitcoin train, we've talked about OTC stuff, how OTC, over the counter, if you don't know what that means, that demand has just been astronomical for the last month. And there's a lot of rabbit holes you could go down with that, with when you see that kind of action happening. But Gemini I think this, if you don't know, Gemini is obviously one of the biggest U.S. exchanges. Gemini and Coinbase, Kraken, really the big ones, Poloniex, I guess. But it's a big fiat exchange, and they're based in New York. And they are doing they're releasing what's called Gemini block trading. And this is coming out on the 12th, so this week. And it's basically they're going to facilitate OTC exchanges, which is a huge business. I mean, there's I believe it's Genesis Trading is in New York. I think they're one of the biggest OTC desks out there, and there's a lot of money that to be made and a lot of volume to be had. So what I think that this means is that there's obviously a huge demand for OTC and large quantity crypto, specifically Bitcoin movement. It's being institutionalized, which means that it's not just kind of anecdotes and people talking about how, there's also OTC. Like this is actually being done across the desks now. But 3, this potentially moves money out of the exchanges, right? It moves it away from spot pricing. What I mean by that is, last week, obviously, George Soros' fund and was it Venrock, which is Rockefeller's fund, and a few others are starting to come into the space. This is the kind of thing that they want. They have so much money that they're not just going to come in and look at Bitfinex, or not Bitfinex in the US, but GDAX or even Gemini. They can't just go and buy $20, $30 million a day on the exchange. And going OTC is kind of a pain because you got to go source sellers and buyers and everything. And so now they can buy it all through this thing called block trading without affecting the price. That's the other thing. Guys, everybody, it's like, oh man, these guys are going to come in and they're going to pump it and they're going to short it and they're going to buy it all. I don't think that they're going to actually buy as many assets as people think that are going to really change the price. I know Venrock says they're in it for the long haul, but that also means that they may be investing more like an incubator as opposed to just like accumulating massive amounts. Because when there is a couple million Bitcoin that people are willing to sell over the counter, that's plenty of supply for people to buy, right? It's plenty for these funds to buy up to be able to hold it long term. It doesn't necessarily change the supply. So if anything, this is going to increase the importance of people to go buy in the exchange. And it seems like I'm kind of beating a dead horse when I tell people like we need more people to buy on the exchange. It's amazing to me how much pushback people just don't want to get new people to come in and buy it on Coinbase. Like it's like a Ponzi scheme to give it to your friends and family. So whatever, like do what you want, but economics are economics. So this is going to be an interesting one. It's also going to be really interesting if they release data on this so we can actually see what kind of volume. But, remember guys, pro money does not lose money. They are not going to lose money. And maybe that, the people that are already owners of crypto benefit in the meantime, but just remember, they're going to make money first, and then everybody else gets like what comes next. And so you got to be thinking like them. How do you extract value from the network? How do you play offense against them, et cetera, et cetera? It's so critical. Now, kind of along those lines, but a little bit different. For anybody out there, especially for anyone who's young, I know that we have a lot of young people who watch and listen to these videos and podcasts. And I think that the article didn't really crystallize this, but the idea is there where all of Bitcoin, the title is, Dear Students, Everything in Bitcoin's Way is Your $1 billion Opportunity, where there's so many opportunities in crypto and blockchain and distributed ledgers over the next 10 years. It's going to be just massive and huge. And what I would encourage people to think about, young people especially, but really anybody who's listening or watching this, is that for 2017, 2018, the discussion, the opportunity has really been about creating the protocols to picking the right coins, to being a part of the right coins, to building the right business. And I think that always is and always will be a huge opportunity, but it's like venture capital. It's like creating a startup in San Francisco or New York or LA or London or Hong Kong, Dubai, wherever you are, Tel Aviv, the big startup kind of hubs of the world. But I think that what you're going to see over the next year, 1 to 5 years especially, is that all of the things that are stopping things like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies from going mass or from having a huge impact, that's where the really big opportunities are, right? The frameworks of the system, the Geminis of the world, the wallets of the world, the marketing services. I mean, everything that facilitates everything to happen, the same way it happened to the internet. Whereas so many people are focused on the assets. What you're really going to see over the next year is the big money coming in, and they'll throw let's call it $20 million at the currencies themselves, but they'll throw $1 billion at the frameworks, at the shovels, at the gold picks, at the exchanges, at the software, everything that's built. And so I would encourage anybody to start thinking about that if you are interested in getting into that world, because this is where a lot of fortunes are going to be made, is in building the frameworks of this community and of this marketplace. So I thought that was just a really important piece. And speaking of which, I think that I would encourage everybody who's interested in macro, not only macro thinking, but just the way kind of macro traders operate. Definitely, I have some not distant cousins, but second cousins, I think, who I've met them a couple times. And one of them is a macro trader over in London, I believe. And, it's kind of a different breed. It's like these big thinking, just huge idea, big bet type of personalities. But this article about Mike Novogratz, who many of you guys know from just being in crypto, really interesting story, not only of his life, but where he's going with cryptocurrency beyond just like what he thinks. And if he's bullish, he is very bullish, obviously. But a lot of people, myself included, were wondering, hey, what happened to this guy? He used to be super active in the community and no one's heard from him in 6 months on Twitter or whatever. And he was about to launch this big fund in December, and then he stopped. And the article walks through this. So I would definitely encourage anybody to read this. It's a long article. It's worth it. I would, 100% sit down for 20 minutes and check it out. But along the lines of what I just said about the building the frameworks, he's got the idea, right? He starts off in the coins. He starts off with the assets, with the tech. And he still obviously believes in all of the tech, but he's seeing the bigger picture like a macro trader would. And so what he wants to do is build a crypto-friendly bank. And that's one of 100 different examples of what could be built to support this whole community. But I do think it can give you an insight into how some of these aggressive hedge fund people are looking at this space. They're not just like looking at the exchanges, looking at the coins, looking at scalping the trades. They're not looking at that. They're looking at how do they make money off of the market, not just the assets. And so check it out. I think that, very, very fascinating, insightful read, both into him as a person, but also just into how he's looking at crypto based on his past as a kind of a big swinger, big win, big loss type of trading track record. So check it out. I think you guys will dig it. And in the meantime, we're going to keep our eyes on BTC. All eyes on BTC and Ethereum this week. Going to keep, especially on Ethereum, make sure this level holds. I think we are we talked about this last week. I think this next week, I would say, it's going to be a big deal as the taxes roll in. We'll see if that's a big deal or maybe if it's not a big deal at all in the U.S. And I know the U.S. is not the center of the universe. I get it. But it is one of the biggest like LTV, lifetime value, crypto countries in the world. That's why we talk about it, because there's so much money per person relative to other countries. That's based on data, nothing else. So we'll see if that's a big deal. Maybe it's not going to be a big deal at all. Maybe there's not going to be any sell-off. Maybe there's not going to be any pump. Maybe there will be a huge one. But that's what we're going to look through. But if nothing else, remember, you don't have to pick the bottom. Wait for the confirmation and then ride the trend. Like 100% better. Like it's way better strategy than trying to knife catch the whole time. Cool. All right, guys. Hope you have a great day, and I will catch you tomorrow. All right. Peace out.